I never thought I'd be here, pouring my heart out to strangers, but life has a way of unraveling when you least expect it. If you've ever believed your world was rock solid, let me tell you, things can crack and shatter in an instant. It all started at a reunion. A night meant to be about nostalgia, laughter, and catching up with old friends. My wife, Kate, was thrilled to go. She'd spent weeks talking about what to wear and speculating on who might show up. I tagged along, not because I was particularly excited, but because it seemed important to her. And, truthfully, I wanted to see her happy. The venue was a charming banquet hall, decorated with fairy lights and scattered with faces that seemed vaguely familiar. We mingled, made small talk, and swapped stories with people we hadn't seen in years. For a while, it was just normal. But then, Kate saw him. His name was Matt. She introduced him to me as a childhood friend, someone she hadn't seen since high school. They hugged like old pals, and I didn't think much of it. At first, anyway. They exchanged a few jokes, caught up on life, and reminisced about the good old days. I smiled politely, happy to let Kate enjoy her moment. But something about the way she laughed at his jokes, a little too hard, a little too long, stuck with me. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was nothing. The night wore on, and I started noticing things I wish I hadn't. The way Matt leaned in when she spoke, like every word was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. The way her eyes lit up when he teased her about old memories. And then there was the fact that their conversations grew longer and more frequent as the night went on, while I stood by, clutching my drink like an idiot. By the end of the night, I was uneasy, but I told myself to let it go. They're just catching up, I thought. It's harmless. I couldn't have been more wrong. The days after the reunion felt different. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Kate and I had been together for over 10 years. Sure, like every marriage, we had our ups and downs, but we were solid, or so I thought. Then, Matt started showing up in little ways. It began innocently enough. Kate would mention him in passing. Matt said he works in marketing now, she'd say over breakfast. Or, did you know Matt traveled to Europe last year? He told me about this little cafe in Paris that sounded amazing. I nodded and pretended to listen. But inside, a strange unease started creeping in. Why was she talking about him so much? Still, I brushed it off. Kate was just reconnecting with an old friend, right? But then, the phone buzzes started. Kate would be glued to her phone in the evenings, smiling at her screen, sometimes laughing quietly. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say, "Oh, just the group chat from the reunion. Everyone's so funny." She was quick to change the subject, and I didn't press her. Not yet. Things escalated from there. One day, while Kate was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen, intending to ignore it, but then I saw his name, Matt. The message preview said, "That's hilarious. You always had the best sense of humor." Winking face. My stomach churned. That tiny emoji, that stupid winking face, felt like a slap. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until the phone buzzed again. I wanted to open it, to see what they were saying, but I didn't. I told myself I wasn't that guy, the snooping, jealous husband. Instead, I left her phone where it was and tried to push the thoughts out of my head. That night, as we lay in bed, I asked her about him, casually, as if I wasn't already tying myself into knots. "How's Matt doing?" I said, staring at the ceiling. Kate hesitated for half a second, but her voice was light when she replied. "He's fine. He's going through a divorce, actually. Poor guy. His wife just wasn't happy anymore." "Huh," I said. "That's too bad." "Yeah," she said, turning away from me. "But he seems to be handling it well. He's a great guy, really resilient." That was the first time it hit me. The way she spoke about him, the way her tone softened. She wasn't just catching up with an old friend. There was something more. And yet, I said nothing. Over the next few weeks, the distance between Kate and me grew more noticeable. It wasn't just her phone buzzing all the time, or the way she seemed distracted during conversations. It was in the little things. The way she stopped reaching for my hand when we were out, the way she didn't laugh as much at my jokes. She was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. One Saturday afternoon, while she was out running errands, I decided to check her phone. I hated myself for even thinking about it, but the gnawing suspicion had become unbearable. Her passcode hadn't changed, so I unlocked it and scrolled through her messages. Most of them were mundane. Text with friends, her mom, the usual. But then I found a conversation with Matt. At first, it wasn't overtly incriminating. They joked about old high school teachers and shared photos of their kids. But the deeper I went, the more intimate the tone became. Matt, you always make me laugh. I missed that. Kate, it's been great talking to you again. I didn't realize how much I missed it too. Matt, I feel like I can tell you anything. Like I don't have to pretend. The last message made my chest tighten. I feel like I can tell you anything. Wasn't that supposed to be me? Wasn't I the person she could turn to? The one she didn't have to pretend around? I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at their texts. By the time I heard Kate's car pull into the driveway, my hands were trembling, and I quickly locked her phone and set it back where I'd found it. When she walked in, carrying grocery bags and humming to herself, I couldn't look at her. I felt like I was holding a secret, even though I wasn't the one hiding anything. She kissed me on the cheek and smiled, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "How's your day been?" she asked, setting the bags down on the counter. "Fine," I said, trying to keep my voice even. She glanced at me, her brow furrowing slightly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their messages. The ease between them, the familiarity, the connection that seemed to flow so effortlessly. My mind spiraled, imagining things that may or may not have happened, and by morning, I felt like a shell of myself. But I still didn't confront her. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in our home became unbearable. Kate didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. She was still glued to her phone, still laughing at jokes I wasn't part of. The small moments that used to connect us were gone, replaced by an invisible wall I didn't know how to break down. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and Kate said she had plans to meet a friend for dinner. She didn't specify who, and when I asked, she said it was just an old coworker. That didn't sit right with me. My gut told me I already knew who she was meeting. After she left, I sat on the couch, staring at the TV but not really watching. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and opened the app we'd both agreed to download years ago. A simple location-sharing app meant for emergencies. Her location pinged at a restaurant across town. It wasn't one she'd normally go to, but it wasn't the location that struck me. It was the context. Why wouldn't she have mentioned where she was going? Why the secrecy? I sat in my car outside the restaurant for nearly 30 minutes, debating whether to go in. Part of me hoped I'd find her sitting with a female friend, laughing over cocktails, and I'd feel like a fool for doubting her. But the other part of me, the part that was growing harder to ignore, feared the truth. Eventually, I couldn't stand the uncertainty. I walked into the restaurant, trying to keep my nerves in check. It was busy, packed with couples and groups of friends. But it didn't take me long to spot her. She was at a corner table, and she wasn't alone. There he was, Matt. They were leaning in close, smiling, talking like they were the only two people in the world. Kate's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months, and something inside me broke. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. Instead, I left before they saw me, my heart pounding and my hands shaking as I drove home. I felt like a coward, like I'd failed to defend my own marriage, but I also knew I wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. When Kate came home later that night, she was full of smiles. "Dinner was great," she said, setting her purse down on the counter. "It was so nice to catch up." I nodded, biting my tongue. "Glad you had a good time." I don't know how I managed to keep it together, but somehow I did. I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. After that night, I knew I couldn't sit idly by anymore. Seeing Kate with Matt had shattered any illusions I'd been clinging to. But I also knew that if I confronted her without proof, she'd find a way to deny it, to twist things around until I was the one apologizing. I couldn't let that happen. I needed evidence, something undeniable, something she couldn't explain away with half-hearted excuses. The next day, While Kate was out running errands, I dug out an old laptop from the closet. I installed a program I'd read about, a way to mirror her phone activity to my device. I felt sick to my stomach as I set it up, knowing this crossed a line I'd never imagined crossing. But desperation does strange things to a person. The program worked almost immediately. Every text, every call, every photo, it all appeared on my screen in real time. I spent the next few days piecing together the puzzle of her relationship with Matt. The messages were constant: morning, afternoon, evening. They ranged from casual, almost innocent exchanges to something far more intimate. Matt, thinking about you today. Wish I could see you. Kate, soon. I promise. You've been so patient. Matt, you're worth it. I felt like I was reading someone else's life, not my own. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This wasn't the woman who'd stood by my side through all the ups and downs of our life together. Then, I found the pictures. They weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. Photos of the two of them at coffee shops, parks, even a selfie taken in what looked like his car. The smiles on their faces were carefree, happy, like they didn't have a single worry in the world. That night, I barely slept. I sat in the dark, staring at the screen, feeling my chest tighten with every new message that popped up. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to throw the evidence in her face and demand answers. But another part of me, the calmer, more calculating side, knew I needed to wait. Kate had no idea I was watching. She was still laughing at his texts, still leaving the room to take his calls, still spinning her web of lies. I needed to let her think she was in control, but I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The following week was one of the hardest of my life. Every smile Kate gave me, every touch, every "I love you" felt hollow. I couldn't shake the images and messages from my mind. The worst part? She seemed oblivious to the tension. Or maybe she wasn't oblivious, maybe she just didn't care. I decided it was time to test the waters. Not a full confrontation, but a subtle probe to see how far she'd go to keep lying. One evening, after dinner, Kate was scrolling through her phone, smiling at something. I sat across from her, pretending to watch TV, though my focus was entirely on her. "Who's that?" I asked casually, nodding toward her phone. She glanced up, her smile faltering for the briefest moment before recovering. "Just a friend from work." I nodded, keeping my tone light. "Matt, right?" Her reaction was subtle, but I caught it. A slight stiffening of her shoulders, the way her fingers paused mid-scroll for just a second too long. "Yeah," she said, forcing a casual tone. "We've been talking since the reunion. It's nice to catch up with old friends." "Old friends," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. She nodded, her smile now a little too bright. "Yeah, he's been going through a lot with his divorce, so I've been lending an ear." "That's all." "That's all?" I asked, my eyes fixed on hers. "Of course," she said quickly, laughing nervously. "What else would it be?" Her defensiveness was telling, but I didn't push further. "Not yet. Just wondering," I said with a shrug, turning back to the TV. "You seem to talk about him a lot, that's all." She didn't respond. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her glance down at her phone, then lock the screen and set it aside. The rest of the night, she seemed quieter, more distracted. When she finally went to bed, I stayed up, staring at my laptop. The messages between her and Matt hadn't stopped. In fact, they'd only become more frequent. She told him about our conversation, about how I didn't suspect anything. The words made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. Let her think she's in control, I reminded myself. Let her keep digging her own grave. After that conversation, it became clear. Kate was lying through her teeth. The messages between her and Matt were a constant reminder of her betrayal, and every time she laughed or smiled at me, it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. But I wasn't going to let her win. I spent the next few days planning my next move. It wasn't enough to confront her. I needed to make sure she couldn't manipulate her way out of this. I needed control. The first step was gathering more evidence. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything. The time she left the house, the excuses she gave, the messages I intercepted. I saved every text, every photo. every piece of damning proof into a secure folder on my laptop. Then I reached out to an old friend, a private investigator named Jack. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew he was someone I could trust. When I explained the situation, he didn't judge. "Let me handle it," Jack said, his voice steady. "If there's anything to uncover, I'll find it." A part of me hated that it had come to this. Hiring someone to follow my wife felt like a betrayal of my own, but I reminded myself that she was the one who'd broken our vows. I was just leveling the playing field. A few days later, Jack called with an update. "I followed her yesterday," he said. "She met with him at a cafe on 7th Street. They stayed for over an hour, and it wasn't exactly a business meeting." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Let's just say their body language was intimate. Lots of leaning in, touching hands, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world." I clenched my jaw, the image of them together burning in my mind. "Do you have photos?" I asked. "Of course," Jack said. "I'll send them to you." "There's more, though." "More?" After the cafe, they went back to his place. They were there for 3 hours. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew this was coming, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. "Thanks, Jack," I said, my voice tight. "Keep digging." When the photos arrived in my inbox later that day, I couldn't bring myself to open them right away. Instead, I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, trying to steady my breathing. Finally, I clicked the file. There they were, Kate and Matt, sitting across from each other at the cafe, their faces lit up with smiles. One photo showed Matt reaching across the table, his hand resting on hers. Another showed them walking out together, his arm brushing against her back. The final photo was the hardest to look at. It was a shot of them entering his apartment building, their bodies close, her face tilted toward him like she couldn't wait to be inside. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was real, and it was time to act. After seeing the photos, something in me shifted. I wasn't hurt anymore, or even angry, not in the way I had been before. No, what I felt now was cold, calculated resolve. I was done waiting for Kate to come clean. If she wanted to lie and pretend, I'd let her, but I wasn't going to play the fool. That night, I watched her more closely than ever. She came home late again, claiming she'd stayed late at work to finish a project. I just nodded, pretending to believe her, though the smile I gave her felt like a stranger's. "You've been working so hard lately," I said as she sat down on the couch, pulling off her shoes. "We should plan a weekend getaway soon. Just the two of us." Her head snapped up, surprise flickering across her face. "Oh, that sounds nice," she said quickly, her voice too bright. "Things have just been so busy, you know?" "I know," I replied, keeping my tone light. "That's why I think we need it. A chance to reconnect." Her lips curved into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're sweet." "Just trying to be a good husband," I said, leaning back in my chair. The way she looked at me then, guilty, almost nervous, was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to herself, pretending everything was fine while sneaking around with Matt. But not for much longer. The next day, I met with Jack again. He handed me a thick envelope filled with more photos, receipts, and even a video clip of Kate and Matt walking out of his apartment together. "This is everything I've got," Jack said, sliding the envelope across the table. "It's enough to blow her cover 10 times over." I nodded, my jaw tight. "Thanks, Jack. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But listen, be smart about how you use this. Don't let her turn it around on you." I appreciated his advice, but I already knew exactly how I was going to use it. That night, as Kate went through her usual routine, dinner, a shower, texting Matt while pretending to scroll through social media, I sat in the kitchen, sorting through the evidence Jack had gathered. Every photo, every timestamp, every piece of proof was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I thought about confronting her then, throwing it all on the table and demanding answers. But no, that would give her too much power. She'd cry, apologize, make excuses, and try to manipulate me into forgiving her. I wasn't going to give her the chance. Instead, I decided to wait. If Kate wanted to play this game, I'd let her. But I was playing to win. I spent the next few days preparing for what I knew would be the most difficult moment of my life. Confronting Kate wasn't enough. I needed to make sure she couldn't deny, deflect, or manipulate her way out of this. She had to face the truth head-on, and I wanted control over how it happened. The first step was securing my assets. I met with a lawyer, explaining the situation and showing him the evidence Jack had gathered. He was calm and professional, but even he seemed stunned by the sheer volume of proof I had. "You've got a solid case," he said, flipping through the photos and documents. "If she tries to take you to court, this will ensure she doesn't get much." "That's the plan," I replied. "I'm not leaving her with anything she doesn't deserve." The next step was setting the stage for the confrontation. I didn't want to do it at home. Too much risk of her walking out, slamming doors, or making a scene. Instead, I chose a neutral location, a private conference room at my lawyer's office. I scheduled the meeting for Friday evening, telling Kate it was for a surprise dinner. "Just wear something nice," I told her. "I've got everything planned." She smiled, looking genuinely excited. "That's so sweet of you. I've been wanting a date night." Her words stung, knowing what I knew. But I kept my expression neutral, nodding as if everything were fine. "It's long overdue." That Friday, as she got ready, I watched her carefully. She spent extra time on her hair, picked out a dress that hugged her figure just right, and applied her makeup with precision. For a moment, I almost admired her. How she could look so radiant, so composed, while carrying such heavy lies. But then I remembered the messages, the photos, the nights she'd spent in Matt's apartment, and any lingering affection I felt for her was replaced with resolve. We drove to the lawyer's office in silence, Kate humming along to the radio while I focused on the road. When we arrived, she looked around, confused. "This doesn't look like a restaurant," she said, her brow furrowing. "It's not," I said, stepping out of the car. "Come on. You'll see." Inside the office, my lawyer greeted us and led us to the conference room. The long table was bare except for a folder sitting at one end. Kate hesitated in the doorway, her confusion deepening. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice uncertain. I motioned for her to sit. "We need to talk." She sat down slowly, her eyes darting between me and the lawyer. "Ethan, you're scaring me." "Good," I said, taking the seat across from her. I placed the folder on the table and slid it toward her. "Go ahead. Open it." She stared at the folder, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for it. When she opened it and saw the photos, her face went pale. She flipped through the pages, messages, receipts, photos of her and Matt together, her breathing growing more ragged with each one. "I can explain," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, you can't," I said firmly. "Not this time." Tears welled in her eyes as she closed the folder. "Ethan, please, it's not what you think." "Stop," I interrupted. "Don't insult me by lying again. I know everything, Kate. The texts, the meetings, the nights at his apartment. Everything." Her lip quivered, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but I quickly pushed it aside. "You made your choices," I said, my voice cold. "You betrayed me, lied to me, and destroyed our marriage. So now, we're going to talk about what happens next." Kate looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Ethan, please." "No," I said, cutting her off. "This isn't a negotiation. I've already filed for divorce. You'll be hearing from my lawyer about the terms. And let me be clear, you're not getting a single thing you don't deserve." Her sobs turned into quiet sniffles, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place, somewhere between regret and desperation. "I never wanted this," she said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, you did," I replied, standing up. "And now you'll have to live with the consequences." As I walked out of the room, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief, but most of all, I felt free. Kate had made her choices, and now I was making mine. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions and logistics. Kate moved out of the house, taking only what she could fit into her car. She asked to come back for the rest of her things later, but I told her to coordinate with my lawyer. I didn't want her near me. At first, I thought I'd feel relief, maybe even satisfaction. But as the dust settled, the silence in the house became deafening. Every room held memories of her. Our wedding photos, the anniversary gifts, the little notes she used to leave me when life was good. I packed it all away, stuffing it into boxes and shoving them into the back of the closet. I couldn't look at them anymore. Meanwhile, the legal process began. My lawyer assured me the evidence would ensure Kate didn't walk away with much. It was messy and exhausting, but it gave me something to focus on, something to anchor me as I tried to make sense of what my life had become. And then there was Matt. I couldn't stop thinking about him. This man who had walked into my life and taken everything I thought was mine. Part of me wanted to confront him, to look him in the eye and demand to know why. But what would that accomplish? He wasn't worth it. Neither of them were. Still, that didn't stop me from digging into his life. Jack, ever resourceful, helped me pull together a file on Matt. His address, his employment history, even a few skeletons in his closet. "Turns out your boy Matt isn't squeaky clean," Jack said over the phone one night. "He's got a history of getting involved with married women. It's like a pattern for him." "Of course he does," I muttered, pacing the living room. "What else?" "Financial troubles," Jack continued. "He's behind on his mortgage and has a string of bad investments. Seems like he's been leaning on your wife for some extra cash." My grip tightened on the phone. I'd seen the bank transfers, money flowing out of our joint account to who I now knew was Matt. It wasn't a lot at first, but it added up over time. "Thanks, Jack," I said, my voice tight. "That's all I need." That night, I sat in the dark, staring at my laptop. I had everything I needed to destroy Matt's reputation: photos, texts, financial records. I could ruin him with a single email, a single post. But as I hovered over the keyboard, something stopped me. What would revenge accomplish? Would it fix what was broken? Would it make the betrayal hurt any less? I closed the laptop, letting out a shaky breath. No, revenge wouldn't fix anything. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to protect myself. In the weeks after Kate left, I tried to piece my life back together. The house, once filled with the warmth of her presence, felt cold and empty. I moved through the days on autopilot: work, eat, sleep, repeat. But every so often, the grief would hit me like a wave, dragging me under. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and volunteering for extra projects. Anything to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how hard I tried, there was always that quiet moment before sleep when the weight of it all came crashing down. My friends reached out, offering their support, but I couldn't bring myself to share the full story. I told them we'd separated, that things hadn't been working out for a while. I couldn't handle the pity I'd see in their eyes if I told them the truth. One evening, I finally decided to make a change. I couldn't let Kate's betrayal define me. I'd lost so much, but I still had my dignity, my career, and a chance to start over. I joined a gym, started running in the mornings, and even signed up for a cooking class. At first, it felt strange, like I was playing a role I didn't quite believe in. But slowly, I began to find moments of peace in the chaos. About 2 months after Kate moved out, I ran into Matt. It was at a coffee shop downtown, a place I used to avoid because I knew Kate and Matt had met there a few times. But that day, I decided to go anyway. I was waiting in line when I saw him sitting at a corner table, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, a smug, infuriating smile that made my blood boil. I wanted to walk away, to take the high road, but something inside me snapped. I walked over, my heart pounding. "Matt," I said, keeping my voice steady. He looked up, clearly surprised by my approach. "Ethan," he said, setting down his phone, "didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah, well," I said, crossing my arms, "life's full of surprises." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Want to sit? We can talk." I didn't want to, but I did anyway. I needed to face him, to say the things I'd been holding inside for weeks. "You've got some nerve," I said, leaning forward, "walking into my life and destroying everything I worked for." Matt shrugged, his smug smile never wavering. "I didn't destroy anything, Ethan. Your marriage was already broken. His words felt like a slap, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. Let me make one thing clear, I said, my voice cold. Whatever you and Kate thought you had, it's not going to last. You're just a temporary escape, a mistake she'll regret for the rest of her life. For the first time, Matt's smile faltered. He leaned back, his expression hardening. Maybe, but at least I was there for her when you weren't. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. You're not worth my time, I said, glaring down at him. Enjoy the mess you've made, Matt. Because when it all falls apart, don't say I didn't warn you. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Kate. The envelope was simple, her handwriting neat and familiar. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to read what she had to say. Eventually, curiosity won. Ethan, I don't know where to start. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but there are things I need to say. I'm sorry for what I did, for the lies, the betrayal, and the hurt I caused. You didn't deserve any of it. I wish I could explain why I did what I did, but the truth is, I don't fully understand it myself. I felt lost, and instead of turning to you, I ran away. I thought Matt could fill the emptiness I was feeling, but I was wrong. He's gone now. Whatever we had, it's over. I see that now for what it was, a distraction, a mistake. I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I have no right to ask for it. But I hope someday you'll find it in your heart to let go of the anger. You're a good man, Ethan. Don't let what I did define you. Take care of yourself. You deserve happiness. Kate. I read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Her words didn't change anything, but they gave me closure. Kate's letter marked a turning point for me. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not completely, but I realized I couldn't carry the anger forever. It wasn't just weighing me down, it was holding me back. I started focusing on the future instead of the past. I poured my energy into work, reconnected with old friends, and even went on a few dates. They didn't lead to anything serious, but they reminded me that life didn't end with Kate. It's been a year since the confrontation. Looking back, I can't believe how much has changed. The house feels like mine now, a place of peace instead of pain. I've built a new routine, found new hobbies, and even started seeing someone. Her name is Sarah. She's kind, funny, and genuine in a way I didn't know I needed. We're taking things slow, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Kate is a chapter in my life that's closed now. She made her choices, and I've made mine. I don't wish her ill, but I don't think about her much anymore. My focus is on the life I'm building, the happiness I'm choosing every day. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. You can take the pain, the anger, the heartbreak, and use it to grow. And for that, I'm grateful.